Today we're taking a look at the most expensive 1940s non-sports cards. Now, while the early 40s were rocked by World War II, this stopped the production of a ton of cards. So there wasn't much during this decade. However, there's still some really expensive cards that fetch well over 5 figures, and you're going to see both Wizard of Oz as well as Superman dominate this decade. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some non-sports cards. All right, let's jump into our top 25 and a few different rules for this video. I try to limit the cards to 1%. Sometimes you're going to see 2%. I didn't want to include anything additional after that. I am probably missing some cards. Look, non-sports is hard, especially with foreign issues and stuff that's not really well documented. There's a lot of cards that are Pop 1, Pop 2. There's cards that grading companies won't grade today that they may grade 5 years in the future, right? So there's a lot of things like that. And also, like, building out this video, it probably took over 10 hours to make. These are super intensive on the research side of things, between trying to find comps, trying to make the list, dwindling it down. So if you are new to the channel, I really appreciate any subscribes. It's 100% for free, but it does help grow the channel and help the YouTube algorithm. Also, I have a vintage Facebook non-sports group. We're the largest now. We're like almost at 2.6K members. And if you want to join and network with other collectors, buy, sell, trade, there it is. All right, let's start off over here. This is a card I found out from Darth Brizzo here on Instagram. And this is an Italian edition of the Castell 1938. Now, the 1938 Castell almost made the list of the Mickey Mouse, I think, last video, but slightly missed it. Would probably be close to an honorable mention. But I wanted to show you a few different things that differentiate both of these over here. Number one is the coloring, as well as the bottom. You can see Mickey Mouse versus Topolino. I'm probably mispronouncing that over here. And then some differences over here based off of the design, right? It looks like there's like a dot here where there isn't a dot over there. There's an additional line right here where it's not over there. And it also has a different back. This looks like the Big Bad Wolf. So this card privately has been selling, I believe, between $500 and $1,000. I don't believe there is any public comps on this, and there's not a specific year. So that's why I put this first. It technically could be a 1930s release. Most likely it's a 1940s. Again, stuff isn't really well documented. All right, 1940 Lone Ranger. This is based off of a TV show, books, movies. There's a lot of Lone Ranger stuff. Even there's a Johnny Depp movie in the 2000s. Some of the prices associated with this, right? So a PSA 2 is quite cheap, $50. But once you scale up, like a PSA 6 sold for $390, a 7 back in 2023 sold for almost $800, and this is a Pop 129. No surprises there, right? When you go back, a lot of card number one and the last card in the set do get a lot of popularity in comps and prices and stuff like that. And you'll see also we have Lone Ranger number 48. It's half the pop, right? 129 versus 62, which I kind of find interesting. Maybe the higher number of Lone Rangers were a little bit short printed, or people don't realize the value on this. You can see a PSA 7 on 48 sold for $463, and a 7 over here, $787. So, and a 225 versus 50. So it's probably about half the price as card number one. What you'll see also will happen to the Superman card number one, and I believe 72. We'll cover it a little bit later in the video, but regardless, it's still pretty expensive, especially for the era. All right, another one over here, 1940 Fairmount Butter, Presidents of the United States, George Washington. I apologize for a pixelated image, just the only one I could find over here. This is considered an unlisted president set from the 1940s. Burdick didn't document it, and there isn't really many sales. I saw an SGC1 of this Washington sell for $150. And most likely I would have put a Lincoln in here, but I did not find an image of Lincoln online for the set. So Lincoln typically outsells Washington a little bit, but it's really like 1A, 1B for pricing, right? Washington is still very close to Lincoln, and $150 for one. You know, if you scale it up to 2s, 3s, maybe you're looking $300 to $500, if not more. Obviously all opinion based because there's no public sales on it, but I just know a lot of presidential collectors flock to rarer releases, and my assumption that this is a little bit of a rare release. All right, first column, Defenders Raising the Flag, number one. This is a 1940 Gaudi set. I believe the designation is R50 on this. not many comps. It's a Pop 11 at PSA, and I saw a PSA 4.5 sold for close to $200 back in 2018. Flag cards have a ton of collectors on the non-sport side of things, especially the American flag with American audience. But yeah, I'd be curious to see where that goes for today. Up next, you have two cards from 1940 A&M Wix Cinema, specifically Volume 2. The first one on here is Alfred Hitchcock, known for the Psycho movie, which is one of the first horror films out there. And obviously has a bunch of other films that he helped develop as well as a director. But it is a kind of a pricey card. A PSA 5 in 2024 sold for $214. I believe I sold a 2.5 or a 3 for like $150 as well. I personally have a 5 in my collection. I want to upgrade it over time. But yeah, I think it's one of your iconic film, not really film stars, but film cards out there. It's a Pop 23 at PSA. I didn't look up the SGC Pop, but I would assume there's at least 5 to 10 at SGC. Okay, so up next we have Wizard of Oz, also from Volume 2. PSA 6 has sold for $245, but recently this year, a PSA 8 sold for $10,000. Now, full transparency, this $10,000 comp is not on VCP. Sometimes VCP does struggle with non-sports sales, but I looked this up originally on like 130 once it sold, and it was featured on our non-sports video series on the channel as well. And I have talked to other private collectors. This card in an 8 has sold in the past for $2,000 at shows. So kind of just to give you an idea on there. It's Pop 26. And one thing I didn't mention about this Volume 2 is often you'll find these cards really nice corners and different things like that, but they have a ton of surface imperfections. There's a few different reasons for that. They tend to be a little bit glossy, so a lot of stuff, impacts it. And then also kind of just how UK collectors collect. A lot of the cards are in binders or tweezers are used to pull the cards out. Those tweezers tend to scratch the surface. So that's why you don't see a lot of these in high grade, even if the corners look great. And yeah, let's move on to the next card. Castell Wizard of Oz. This is considered the header card. You can see on the box itself, this was attached to it. So you're not going to get really many high grades on it. A PSA 4 sells for about $300. A PSA 6, $425. I do believe there are higher grades than the 6 though, and it is a Pop 67 at PSA. We're jumping into our first Superman cards, and this is the R146 Novelty Candy. And this is considered the coupon card over here. This was a 36 card set plus the coupon, so I believe 37 in total. And these were actually the first Superman trading cards to be released. This was before the Gum series that will be featured on this video. This card right over here is a Pop 73 without the bottom, and there's a Pop 4 with the bottom itself. Again, there is a decent amount of these also at SGC, but I did not include that in the video. Pricing wise, if you do have the coupon attached here at the very bottom, there is a premium associated with it, although the prices over here don't really reflect it. I think these are kind of low, but regardless, without the coupon, sold this year for $250 without in a PSA 1. With the coupon, sold for $610 in a PSA 2. And now we're jumping into the 1940 Superman. This is card number 1. Quite expensive card. Another card that is constantly featured in our vintage non-sports series every single month. PSA 1s typically sell in those videos anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 based off eye appeal. PSA 4 also sold in 2024 for $7,800. Pop on this card, PSA is $200. Another card that is featured quite a bit is card number 72, which is the last card in this set. That's a Pop 88. The later cards in the set were printed less than the earlier ones. And again, being a last card, there is going to be a premium attached to it. A PSA 5 sold for $6,600, but a 1 you could find anywhere from $500 to $1,500. So again, cheaper than card number 1, tougher to find, but it is kind of propped up a little bit by set registry collectors, but still, it's a good one to have. And the rarest of the Superman cards is this 1941 Superman Junior Defense League of America. Just for an idea on how card number 1 sells for, back in 2015, the raw copy, the one I'm showing right over here, sold for about $1,600. Non-sports back in 2015 was a completely different game. And also to mention, another card where PSA grades it with the coupon and also without the coupon. There's only a pop 4 at PSA, 2 of each over here. These are extremely tough to find. And we actually covered these also in our live stream just recently. We're talking about Superman cards as well as Leaf. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the set, because I'm not an expert on it, make sure to check out the live tab and look at our latest video over there. Okay, so this is one where I'm gonna disagree with the PSA and SGC labels on these for the Barratt Wizard of Oz. I believe SGC labels this as a 1939 release. I'm contesting that, and also I'm pretty sure I've talked to a few other collectors who say this is a 1940 or 41 release. Here's the reason why. These Barratt cards were released over in the UK, but the Wizard of Oz wasn't released into the UK until November 1939. So unless these cards were issued before the movie was over in the UK, probably not a 1939 release. I understand 1939 being the first year of Oz, but again, a little bit more research. But there's 2 cards featuring. First over here, you have Dorothy as well as Toto, not the band. And the second one over here is going to be the Wicked Witch. Unfortunately, these are not listed on VCP, so I can't give you exact comps. But based off of knowing a bunch of other non-sports collectors that go after Oz, these cards are $300 plus. It really depends on the condition. You find a lot of these in like a 1 to 2 grade, but there are nicer ones out there. And also to mention too, with this Wicked Witch, it does not have a Castell card. So if you're going after Wicked Witch, this is one of your only options out there. And yeah, so more Oz. And now we're going to jump into military. 1941, Uncle Sam, you are in the Army now. A PSA 5 sold back in 2021 for $111. We're at PSA 7 and 2019 sold for $225. It's only a pop 26 at PSA. Another card from the set, number 144. The last card, Woman Flyers in Defense. PSA 3.5 sold for $188 in 2019. PSA 5 sold for $267 in 2016. It is a pop 17. So again, lower pop on that side of things. We're jumping into a Disney card, and almost featured 2 from the set over here. This is 1942 Bruguera Colchera. There's also a Ruth, not from the same set, but from the manufacturer as well. I have seen online that this year is possibly contested, so it's not 100% set in stone that this is a 1942 release. So I do want to let you know on that side of things. What I have found out too on this specific card or this set is the Pluto tends to be a bit rarer than the Mickey in the set. The Mickey also features Walt Disney. The Pluto features Pinto Colvig, probably mispronounced it, but doing a little bit of research on him, he was the original Disney performer that did the voice for both Goofy and Pluto. So if you do collect those characters, he was the original voice on that side of things. And again, honorable mention, it's going to be Mickey Mouse with Walt, card number 1. All right, another war one over here. I had to blur out a few different things. I'm sure you know who this is on this side of things. This was a strip card set. From researchers, a lot of different variants based off of in color as well as cardstock, which kind of makes sense, right? You're in the middle of a war. Pricing wise, they were all over the place. So I saw 2 comps on this card back in 2018. A BVG 1.5 sold for $375, but then there was an SGC 5 with probably one of the worst picks I've ever seen on the listing, and that's tough to say, right? And that sold for $100. Buy it now. So hard to say what that would do in today's environment, but I think it should have made the list. All right, up next we have a trio gum of Truman. Back in 2020, this sold for $1,336 at the Vintage Non-Sports auction. And the reason why it's 45 is that's when Truman became president, right? And so that means the set has to be at least 1945. It could be newer than that as well. But you typically see this listed as sometimes a 1930s or a 40s release, which makes no sense because that's when Truman was president, 45 and later. I also put honorable mention here of Lincoln. And I think this is one of those cases where Lincoln and Washington do not sell for the most in the set. Truman might have been like a short print or something along the lines in this set, if I remember correctly, reading from the auction listing. But a Washington 2.5 sold for only $200 in 2024. That's a big price difference. So what Truman also has going on from this is possibly a rookie card, and I say possibly because I don't always fully believe the rookie card classifier with non-sports cards. Presidents are a little bit easier to identify than other subject matter, but regardless, a super early Truman card, one of his first as president, versus Lincoln, who has tons of cards beforehand. This Lincoln card still should make his top 25 list because Washington made his. I just recorded that Washington video also, just to let you know. All right, we're jumping into 1947 now. I'm going to feature two different Frank Sinatra cards, just because Sinatra was such a popular figure. And just to take this off of what I grabbed from Wikipedia, nicknamed the chairman of the board and called Old Blue Eyes, is regarded as one of the most popular entertainers of the mid-20th century. Sinatra is among the world's best-selling music artists with an estimated 150 million record sales. This one with the tab, which you can see is the corners all over here, or the sides, right? Sold for $198 in 2023 as a PSA 4. Typically what you see is these are all trimmed, and you'll just have this center over here. This is also a foreign release, I should mention, based out of the United Kingdom. And it's a pop PSA, it's a pop 8 at PSA with this fully intact. And you rarely see those. Another one over here was the Quada, and I probably mispronounced it, but Quada Film Stars. He actually has three different cards, 72, 73, and 145. I believe he also has some oversized ones. I don't know if they're considered Quada or not. And 145 is going to be Series B or 2. They had a few different series of this. Regardless, this PSA 3 sold for $66. It's a pop 5 at PSA. And I still think this has pretty good room to grow. Up next, we have a 1948 Leaf Pirates of Blackbeard. This is considered the first Leaf trading card set, something that I learned also in that Leaf live stream. I mean, I've pitched that twice, but highly recommend you guys check out those live streams. I'll also be going live early in January. I don't know if that's going to be for this video or after. Regardless, the last public sales of this card were in 2021, so it's almost been 4 years since the sales. PSA 2 sold for $62. A PSA 8 sold for $499. The Pirates market has developed a ton since 2021. I don't think you're getting this card under $200 or $300 in low grade today. It's a Pop 27 numbered, and then it's also a Pop 0 unnumbered. So one thing also I learned from that live is that with these Leaf Pirates, there's two different versions of them. One has a card number on the back, one does not. So the unnumbered is going to be much tougher to find, and Blackbeard has none graded at PSA. Our last two cards are going to be from Comic Post. This is Robin. Also, I don't know specifically how to differentiate the 1949s versus 50s or the type 1s, type 2s. So if you have a little bit more information, please let me know. An SGC2 of this Robin sold for $51. But what I will say is I think this has a ton of room to grow, and that's why I put this in the video. I think some of the early cards before mainstream releases of like Batman, Robin, Superman, different things like that, I've been getting a lot of popularity. And I think this card, even today, would still sell $100 plus if it went to auction. I wasn't familiar with this card before doing a little bit of research and asking around with other collectors. I always thought the first Robin card was in 1966. With part of that Batman set, but this predates it quite a while, and I just don't think a lot of people know about it. And lastly, another 1949 Comic Post. This is a Superman PSA 5 sold for $550 back in 2023. It's also Pop 4 between Type 1 Type 2, which I think was the same. No, Robin has 5, Superman has 4. So these are, again, super tough cards to source. They do have rounded corners, so you are kind of expected to find these in higher grades. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys for checking it out. On the screen right now, I'm going to put the playlist for the decades. We have 30s in there now. We have 40s. Next is going to be 1950s. And then also thank you to the following channel members. And again, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. A ton of work was put into it. All right, see you guys.